The butter cake that I tried was actually my favourite cake on the entire trip. But for me, it was all about the topping, and it was a mixture of icing sugar, butter, flour, eggs, and milk baked onto that dough. What I'm going to do is create a taste very similar, but do the garnish and the topping separate in this fig and butter cake. So first thing for our cake, we're going to use just a normal sort of Swiss roll tin, and I'm going to lightly butter this. Now the butter isn't to stop the cake from sticking, it's to stick the paper to the tray. And the easiest way to do this is just cut the corners. And then when you place the paper onto the tray, the edges fold in nice and neat. I learnt that, to be honest, from my grandmother when we used to do Swiss rolls, because she hated broken edges. She wanted a perfect square edge to it. And it's a great tip that I still use in the restaurant now. Nice and simple. Now for our figs, and figs and butter are a great combination.
Cut them into slices and place them in a baking tin. Now for the cake batter. Cream butter, caster sugar and light brown sugar together.
Now there's not a lot of butter going in there, and it's purely the fact that we're going to use these two next ingredients. I've got some buttermilk here, and buttermilk's used a lot in cakes in the US because it's got a distinct sort of flavour to it, like a little acidity which goes really well with cakes. And also what they use is a lot of oil. This is rapeseed oil, great for cake baking because it's quite a mild flavour, but will give it a lovely colour when it cooks in the oven.
Add the buttermilk, followed by eggs and rapeseed oil.
Pretty good. Now you see, because of the oil in there, it just separates the mixture a little bit. You can see that. Don't worry about this, because when we add the flour and everything else, the salt, it's going to hold it all together. So, good pinch of salt, about a teaspoon of baking powder. We're going to mix in with the flour, and a teaspoon of vanilla. So, throw in the flour and just lightly mix it together. And this is important to do this bit by hand. You can actually see the mixture starting to come together. It's gone from a split mixture to almost like a Swiss roll sort of texture. It's very different to sort of a sponge mixture, more runnier and lighter because of the oil that you've got in there. So once we got to this stage, you can quickly pour it onto the tray.
When the cooked cake gets turned out of the tin later, the figs end up on the top.
So we just knock the tray. This will just get the cake mixture right into the corners, and then pop it straight in the oven. And this wants to cook for about 15 minutes. Now while that's cooking, this whole thing is all about the topping.
In my version of the butter cake, I'm using icing sugar with butter that I'll serve with the cake once it's baked. Just whisk them together.
And it'll go really, really white in colour. Now you could flavour this with vanilla, a touch of brandy if you want. So once you've mixed in all the icing sugar, whisk this for about 10 minutes, it should be ready.
The cake needs to sit for about 5 minutes before it gets turned out of its tin to reveal the lovely figs. Serve up a generous slice with a big dollop of the buttercream.
And there it is. We've got a fig and butter cake.